All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Phil Demetriadis here. And in today's character design class, I want to go over a couple basics about what is expected from you in terms of turning in your characters with a cleaned up line and also putting some color underneath. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you a couple samples from the industry. I'm also going to show you a couple student samples, okay? Everything we've done up to this point in this class, we've talked about silhouettes, we've talked about designs, taking our rough silhouettes and then our rough designs, going through another phase of doing squash and stretch, and then pulling out our shapes where we keep practicing and we keep squashing and stretching, and then we get to the final outcome where we have a character that we like, okay? So here, these are Beverly's here, who's in the intermediate advanced class, right? And this was her work from last semester. So I wanted to give you an idea of exactly what she did in terms of getting to that linear phase. So what you need to do, I gave you guys some brushes already, okay? You have your rough drawing of your character. You want to go over your character and do a nice cleanup, okay? And that is something that's going to take some time. When we look at Beverly's work right now and we pull out, that line looks absolutely fantastic. And what I've noticed before with students is there's lots of different brushes that are out there. I gave you guys some. There's some brushes on calligraphy. Jarek made his own brush just goofing around with Photoshop. You can just type in line cleanup brushes. I can give you more of my brushes. There are so many different brushes that are out there that are available for you to go over your rough drawings, okay, with the Cintiq for you to clean up your lines. Now, what I like about this is Beverly's line looks absolutely pristine, and what I really like is that it's very nice, thick and thin, okay? But what's cool is when you zoom into it and you look at it like this, you're like, hey, it's a lot more, there's a lot more rough feeling to it. And that's because when you're zoomed into an 11 by 17 image that's 300 DPI, you can have that type of sort of rough pencil feel to the line, but when we zoom out of it, that's what we end up with, and that looks fantastic, okay? Those are really great examples of how we can use a basic tool to go around. Now, you guys have 3 characters that are due, right? Our basic approach, okay? So you can clean those 3 up. You have a bunch of rough drawings, silhouettes, whatever. You go over them with another layer. You clean them up. Now, some of you might be using Photoshop. That's just fine. If you're using Sketchbook Pro, which is also a great software, they have different brushes in there. They have a marker brush. They have pen brushes. You could use the pencil brush. You just got to make it a little bit larger in size, but that's also very efficient as well. Okay. So what we're going to do first, I want to show you some of our other projects here that we did from last semester, and you could go in here. I like to zoom in and show you the line because one of the brushes that she has, it's actually pretty neat. Do you see what it looks like? It has this sort of nice sort of pencil texture to it, but it holds together very well. When you're working in this, Beverly, do you ever feel like you're like, oh my gosh, there's hesitation between the line and it's not quite connecting? But then when you have to remember, when you zoom out of your image, you look at how crystal clear it is. And that's what people are going to notice. They're going to be looking at your image like this. They're not going to be looking at your image like that. So don't be overly paranoid if it looks a little bit pixelated. That's totally fine, okay? So what I'm going to do really quick is I want to show you some samples from animation and from the industry on what has sort of influenced the way characters are presented, and I want to talk about presentation. And then I'm going to come back and I want to show you 2 quick approaches in Photoshop and how you can take your character cleanup line and how you could change the color of it and why you would want to change the color of it, because there's a purpose for that, okay? So really quick, let me leave the images here. Okay, let's come over here, and I have a couple files here. Let me open these up. And let's start off. First thing I want to do is I want to go through these examples right here, and I want you guys to see. I just grabbed some basic examples from online of different, what I would call render styles for doing cleanup, okay? And there are different styles for presenting your work. If you're working on a game project and your particular style is realism, you're going to have to go in there and you're going to have to render the heck out of your characters, okay? And it takes quite a bit of time. I found this example. The artist here was Avior, and I thought it was a really good example. This is a type of work you're going to be expected to do at a game studio at this quality of realism and realistic rendering. But you'll notice as we start to zoom into a couple of these, there's a lot of rendering going in here. You have a dedicated light source coming from a particular direction that's hitting a character. You have light coming in, you have a light side, you have a dark side, you have dedicated shadows. It's a lot of time to do that type of work, okay? I'm not requiring you to do this type of work in this class. A lot of what we're doing as designers, especially in an intro to character design class, is you're coming up with designs and you're throwing color under them really quick to show them or to present them for approval. In that approval process, it might go to an art director, it might go to a character design lead artist, it might go to the creators of the show, the executive producer might make comments on it. So you don't want to spend too much time having to over render your stuff, right? Because it's going to get changed and people are going to make comments on it, okay? Now, here's another approach, and this is more of sort of a simplified approach of what we're sort of going for here, okay, where we basically have a really simple undervalue, what they call local color value, okay? So the local color here is a base skin color, okay? There's no other indications of light hitting that particular character. If you look closely at here, there's no highlights, there's no core shadow. That's totally fine. You can do a lot with presenting a character just by getting in and having this really basic local color. So local color of an object, okay? I have the worst shirt on because it's gray and black, but if you look at like a blue shirt, the local value is blue. The highlights on that shirt are going to be a lighter blue, so it's going to be that blue with white added to it, right? And then the shadows of that shirt are going to be that blue with some black added to it, which create the shadow color, okay? Here, the only thing this artist is using, the only two differences in presenting their work is, number one, they have a gradient happening in the hair right here that gets the characters to pop. There's a little bit of a gradient here in this hair from yellow to orange. There's a little bit something happening up here. But other than that, the only difference is the character line. The character line has been changed. Phil, why would I want to change character line? Well, there's some important reasons. I'm going to show you some examples, okay? Part of animation and the historical significance of the way characters are displayed, especially when we look at American animation, we look at influence of Japanese animation, okay? Let me show you a couple examples, right? So right here, this is an example, actually worked on that movie. That's Winnie the Pooh's Heffalump movie, okay? In this style, they use a very thin black line. This is a Disney style, right? And then the background is done in like a watercolor technique, okay, with very thin line around the outside parts of the line with these sort of nice stamped watercolor feel. And what that does is it creates contrast where you have a character that's a base color, okay, and then you come in here and you have these sort of overdeveloped, lightly rendered sort of trees and plush backgrounds that contrast against the character and make the image sort of pop off the page, okay? Hold on, we'll come back to this in a minute. Here's another example, okay, 101 Dalmatians. Part of the 101 Dalmatians style was a nice thick and thin black line around the character with thin lines inside the character, like here on the character hair, with just a base value underneath, okay? That's important because part of their style that translated into their design process was knowing that they were going to go over all their characters with a thick black line. That's a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing is what happens when you go over characters with a black line. It flattens the characters. That's right. So that's why some of the other examples I have here, that's why people will go back over their designs, like in this example here, and they go over their line weight and they change the color of the lines. Because now the lines still hold the character together, okay? But the line blends into the local value of the particular object. So for example, the character's hair, the character's flesh, the character's jacket. So if this jacket is a yellow, it's now a darker yellow line around just that part of the jacket. If this dress is like a light red here, you'll notice the line is sort of a light red. You see that? So the line has been enhanced or changed to get the character to sort of pop off the page. That totally works. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, let me show you another example here, right? Here's another typical example. This reminds me a lot of Japanese anime and influenced design styles where there's a nice, thin, petite line around the character and there's just very simple local value placed under the character. Okay, now on this example, if I wanted to show light source coming in, so if I have light coming from left to right, all I would have to do is come back under the paint option. Remember, you're going to have structured your Photoshop file in a couple different ways. First, you're going to always have your line cleanup on the top. Underneath that's going to be your color fill in, okay? So when you fill in local color, if I wanted to make this feel a little bit more three-dimensional, all I have to do is pick the direction of a light source, come in here, take my lasso tool, and select areas in here. Now there's a couple different ways. I've had students go, well, I could just do dodge and burn. Okay, you want to do that? Go for it. You want to come back in, you want to select with the lasso tool, and imagine lights coming in from the left, and you select areas of highlights here on this character, even on the legs. And then what you do is you create another layer, and you either can fill that color being a little bit lighter, or you can select the color on the core layer, go to levels and adjust the level setting and lighten it, okay? And then the same thing, if I'm doing that for highlights, I then come in and I could select areas of my character here that might have shadows on it, and then I could darken that area for shadows. I'll show you an example in a second here. Okay, so when we start looking at some examples we have this huge variety of different examples to show you. We have television animation, okay, with different examples. You have shows that used to be television animated that then went to what we call DVD production, and that even went to sort of like light feature film, like Winnie the Pooh, okay, is a good example of that. And then you have, especially in TV, you have a whole realm of just different character design styles. You have stuff like Samurai Jack, where you lose a lot of the line and you just have light against dark, okay? All these different styles that come forward. So what's really important is that you as a designer, you start looking at some of these styles and you become a little bit more aware of them, and you start to see what people are doing. Okay, so look at this style right here. The line weight is very thin. You see how we can barely see the line on the characters here? Okay, but what they've done is they have the local value with light coming in a direction. Then they circled an area with the lasso tool and they darkened it and they put a shadow in. So if I start to look at these characters, you will see a light side and dark side. See that? Light side, shadow side. Light side, shadow side. You see that happening in there? So that's really easy. This is sort of that next step up from the local value, where then we come back on top of it and we select an area, and it's, might be light, and then we select it one other side. Excuse me, I meant to say is that we have the local color like that blue, and then we select the shadow side and we just darken it with the level options, okay? And it doesn't matter, you might be a level guy, maybe you're the type of person that wants to use curves. It doesn't matter. We're just darkening the local color, and it creates this sort of presentation. This is a great, simple feel for presenting your characters to a client, and this is something that's commonly used inside the animation industry at the television realm. Okay, it's simple, it's easy, and some of this comes from a little bit of comic books. Now, I mentioned comic books there. Comic books have all different types of styles, and comic books also use gradients. There's no gradients in these characters right now. We'll get to that in just a minute, okay? Let me show you another sample, okay? Here's another way for showing your work. Now, this is what I prefer to do in more of a rough stage. If I'm in a rough stage with characters and I'm presenting work to somebody, I prefer to draw on a tone paper or a light gray paper. That way, anything that is white is going to pop out as a dedicated highlight, and it creates contrast and balance inside my work. So when you look at this, I just looked online, I found this, I think this is Aaron Blaise. I think it's a really wonderful little sketch here, and that's a quick, easy way to show your work to somebody. You'll notice the lines are still rough, right? So that's fine too. So I had that question from the students, do I have to clean up my line? You don't have to clean it up 100%, but your work needs to look presentable. There's a difference there. That work right there is presentable to me because there's still enough line around the character for me to see what's happening with the character, but it's also rough and has some broken spots that allow for a little bit more movement and keep a life into the character. We haven't completely killed the gesture of the character by flattening it with a total tight line, okay? Nothing wrong with that. However, I don't want you guys to be turning your work in gray right now. I want you to put in a little bit of light color. You do not have to have a white background. We'll talk about presentation in a second, Okay, these are things I want you to think about. Here's another great example. So this right here, this is a character design assignment where a student's gone in and they've darkened the line around the characters, okay? So the skin's green, the outside line's a darker green, okay? And then what he's done is he came in with a little bit of an airbrush tool and he put some little hints of a little bit of, I'm not going to call it shadows, but just a little bit of an offset color to get that sort of cheeky feel. And that little airbrush feel in here makes the characters feel like they're sort of alive, and there's a little bit of variation, maybe a little change happening on the skin tone. Notice over here on the turtle right here, okay? Keeping it simple, okay? Again, Winnie the Pooh, straight lines, no thick and thin, just really lightweight line, base color, but then the backgrounds have light and dark in them, and they're supposed to be very soft. This creates contrast inside the design, okay? Because if the characters look just like, if the environments look just like the characters, there'd be no visual contrast happening and it would be boring to the viewer, okay? All right, with that aside real quick, I want to go back. I want to show you some student samples that I have from previous students. I want you to take a look at how they're doing their work, okay? This is from Trevor Wright. One of the things Trevor did when he did this is he had sort of this rough sketch of the characters in here. He then came back in with, there's a couple brushes in Photoshop that do watercolor, and they have a nice sort of watercolor feel to them. So you're able to get in and throw down a local value of a character, but then you can come back in with these brushes. By the way, if you were to pull up Photoshop like this, okay, and if you were to hit B, right click on the brushes, go to the gear sign and say natural brushes right down here, 1 and 2. The watercolor brushes are in, the standard default brushes are in there. They're very fun to use, they're very simple, and then this is the type of effect that they create when you use them. They're very light and they have that sort of wet water feel, and if you go over you can create that type of look, okay? So what looks great about this character, that Trevor hates this but I still like it, is the silhouettes are easy to read on a white page, and if you look at the color's there, but it's not overly rendered and there's still some line on it. I think that's a great example, okay? Here's another sample from Beverly when we look at what she was doing, okay? Beverly has really base colors in here. See the local color on these characters? That's a skin color, and then she came in and she puts a little bit of an edge for shadows, okay? That shadow combined with a drop shadow under the character makes the character feel a little bit more realistic. The other thing it looks like that she's doing at times, if you come in here and look, okay, she has a little bit of contrast where it looks like there's a little bit of a gradient. So if we look here on the hair, we have a little bit of dark in here that's sort of airbrushed in, right? See that? And then she comes over and she's pulled out a little bit of a highlight on the top there. So anytime you take a local value, you put a shadow on it, and then you put a highlight on it, you're going to create a pop, right? That pop, that's the basics of rendering. That's when we have a basic sphere, and we have a local value with a dark side and a light side. Those all come together and they create that little pop. So what I like about this is that there's a simplicity of, look at that shirt, it's not overly rendered, okay? There's a simple local value here, but she's also coming in a couple spots and she's doing a little bit of some opposite color approaches. For example, she has a warm, she has a little bit of a cool in here. Do you see that? Does that get lost in your print, Beverly? Yeah, it usually does. So I know, because it's funny, I'm looking at this and I'm all, hey, I haven't really noticed that before, but in the print it gets lost. Well, that's another thing you need to think about as a designer. How is your work going to be displayed? Are you sending it to your client? Are they going to open it on a computer? You work in a Mac, they work in a PC. PCs always darken images. Are you going to have to print it out and put it on a presentation board in front of art directors? Are they going to put it on a projector that's being displayed on a wall? What's the lighting conditions of the room? All those things you have to think about when you send your work off to somebody. Okay, but when you look at this, what I really like, to me, the drop shadows are easy. Okay, drop shadows, all you do is you take the color of your character and then you go in, you copy and paste it on another layer, you drop all the levels down so it's a light gray, and then you just transform it and squash it underneath the character. It has a way of anchoring characters down to a page. Drop shadows are great. They're very simple and easy. And just what Beverly's doing in here, just a little bit of a light against dark. Do you see how well the characters read in there? Okay, they're very simple. They're not overly done. Okay, there's another sample from Beverly. Okay, so if you come in here, you'll start to notice, look at the samples here. Most of the line weight here is all black, right? Right. Okay, we come over here, and you're going to notice that now she's changing a little bit of the line color. Okay, why? Well, this was her first version of the assignment you guys are doing right now. There's her birds, there's her cats, there's her turtles. Okay, well, her bird is purple. Black on purple might not look that great, right? So I'm going to show you in a couple minutes how you adjust your line weight and the color of your weight. It's really easy. It's very simple. I'm going to give you the easy approach and the complicated approach to it. Okay? All right. So again, if we come in here and look, we have light against dark, and then we have the line color itself has been changed, and we have the drop shadow. So when we zoom out of that work, it looks nice, it's easy, it's presentable, and most important, the thing about, I'm going to talk about this. I've had students in classes that do good work and they do crappy presentation. That's the worst thing you could ever do, is not put any effort into your presentation. Presentation is really simple graphic sensibilities that allow your work to pop off the page. Here, she has a very light gray with some light shadows that allow the color to pop off. The gray is muted, it flattens down, the color comes forward. I have students, I didn't want to show any student work that I consider to be bad, because it's like I'm picking on them, but I have students that give me like red backgrounds or bright purple backgrounds. That's not a good idea to do, because that color has so much intensity to it, it's going to flatten out part of the character design. So in a presentation standpoint, you always need to remember your characters should be popping off the page. That's the focal point, not the background. People get caught in the background and they start putting trees and houses and stuff in the back. No, it's too much, it's overkill. Keep it simple. You know, part of art is being simplistic and coming up with easy solutions. All right, so there's another one of Beverly's that you put up, right? Thank you for giving me those samples. Same principle here. Are you using the airbrush tool when you're putting in your shadows in there?
Yeah.
Okay, another thing I've noticed Beverly that she does, which is cool, she's putting really simple textures. She's not having to wrap that texture over the shirt to the circumference of the shirt depending on the horizon line. It doesn't have to be that precise. She's just going in there and she's throwing in a simple texture so you can see what the shirt's doing. Okay, and here all the lines stayed black, but I also noticed they get very thin and they're easy to see. Okay, all right, look at that, simple, easy read, works great, great visual read. Okay, here's another one of my students, Christina Cornett. This is something that she was doing where she was keeping her line in sort of this soft sepia. Okay, then she's going back and putting a little bit of light color and gray and getting some of her characters to work. I think this is great for a rough pass and showing your work and getting people to look at stuff very quickly, and then you still have to make changes and do finished cleanup. If I was turning my work in a final presentation to an art director, I would go a little bit beyond this level. And Christina would do that. She goes right past this and do a higher level. Okay, this is Maddie. Here's another one of my students, right? Who's done really well. Maddie does this thing where she puts a local color in, and then she comes in with a brush, and she hits that color. So that's the local color. Do you see that green right there? And then she comes in with a brush, and she hits a little bit of shadow, darkens that color of green to create the shadow. Then she comes in with another brush, and then she hits a little bit of the highlight. So she has the local value, which was the green. She has the lighter color and the darker. Then one of the things that Maddie does at the end is she comes in with a little bit of texture on parts of the character. So I don't know if you can see it here, but there's a little bit of grainy splat in there. Do you see it? She takes a grainy brush at the end and comes along and throws a little bit of a nice curve in there, and that creates some really fantastic effects where it makes her rough comps sort of pop off the page, and it looks great. Okay, here's another one of Trevor's, different style. What I like about Trevor's work, he's a really, really proficient designer with characters, and he cleans them up in different ways. So this is more sort of a TV style. Okay, now one of the only arguments I had on this was, you see how the colors here compete a little bit against the colors of the characters? I told him on this one, lighten the hue down on that. It's a little too bright. Make it a little bit lighter. And what he's doing, he's trying to have opposites against each other. So if he wants to get this sort of brown to pop and having the blue next to each other with that purple, it's going to do that. Here he's got the yellow and the pink. That's fine. The character pops, but your eye also gets locked up a little bit here in some of that contrast. Overall, it's a nicely done piece. I just told him just lighten some of this up in the back here. A little bit lighter so the characters are number one. Okay, that's another one of Trevor's styles. See that? That's really thin line, cleaned up in Sketchbook Pro. Then he comes back in and he sort of does this really sort of soft, okay, local value with just a little bit of light against dark. You see that? Come over here, light. There's the local value, a little bit of highlight, a little bit of dark there. That's it. Nothing more than that. He's not over rendering, but the characters come off the page. Another sample of Maddie's. Okay, here Maddie changed part of the outside line color. It's not black anymore. It's like a light red. So what does that mean? If you start thinking about little light reds, some light blues, depending on the color of your character, by adjusting that line weight, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's something that's very effective for you to do on your characters. Okay, there's another sample for Maddie. Okay, notice the background, how light and soft those pastel colors are. They're very light because it gets the characters to come off the page. Okay, all right, this is great. This is student work that she did, and this, with a couple years of other assignments, she had all this in her blog. And when I got a call from a buddy of mine who's a director now, who's working as a story soup on a project, I was able to forward Maddie's stuff over to them, and she started working on a division of Disney TV's, one of her first jobs. Just to be able to go out there, but this is the work she's presenting in class. You see that? There's a lot to say, about presentation, right? And about getting your work. So not only are the characters here, but do you see how she went to the extra mile to put something behind them? And it doesn't even have to be that extreme. It just looks nice, okay? All right, this is another student, Shelby Bennett. Again, simple colors, and then she just put this sort of blotchy, like painted rough background in there, but it's very light, it reads very easy, and this were her lineup for her Mortuary 101 students, okay? Simple, easy, all right? Sandy Fonseca, another one of our students who did really well. Same thing here. Characters, light against dark, that's it. Simple approach. So you're not having to go in and render. Render takes a lot of time. Simple color approaches to get your characters to read. Trevor, again, look at these though. These characters he did these in sort of a Warner Brothers style, okay? The line is very, very thin and very light. It's a very light gray now. And then he has this local color of the character, which is just this light little color with a little bit of shadows on it. That's it. But look at the presentation. The presentation's key. He has his villains up here, this nice little gradient, this little area back here. You print that out, it looks beautiful on a page. Okay? Simple and easy. There's something to say about that level of presentation. Rachel does this all the time where she takes, now Rachel's getting into some other airbrush and gradient effects on some of her local color. That's fine. So that means you could throw a local color down, come back and take an airbrush tool, or you can take a gradient and make selections and strike gradients on other layers on top and then blend those layers in. I can cover some of that technique a little bit later, but I'm just describing what's happening here. But what I like about what Rachel does, and I love to do this too on mine, is look at how easy it is to read. You see exactly what the character is in the gray. Really simple, light gray that allows the color to pop off the page. Okay? Very easy. Okay? Another one from Rachel here. Here, this is a little bit more complicated. I like, because there's an example of where she was with a line very light, toned down with the color. Now here, she's lost the line completely. This is much harder to do on your first assignment. I'm not expecting you to do this. But eventually, the more that you work, you get to a phase in your drawing where you can lose the line completely and you can allow the characters to pop off the page, where we just have the value, the local value, with either the highlights and the shadows and the little gradients that allow the characters to come off. It changes the style of this and puts it into another style variation. Okay? All right. And there was Trevor's piece there. Okay. So with that said and done really quick, what I want to show you to wrap this up, we looked at them real quick. I got to show you Creature Box, okay? Because in my opinion, these two gentlemen have sort of mastered, they've taken an approach to working with characters, and they have great silhouettes, great design, simplicity. They use Sketchbook Pro for cleaning up their characters, okay? And what they do is they come in, this is sort of the process. You can look at some of their demos that are online on YouTube, okay? They come in and they start with sort of a local value. They come on, they put shadows, they put highlights, and then at the very end, they come back and they start to put gradients and textures. Let me repeat all that for you. Okay, this is a much more advanced level, but you get a much higher end product that comes out at the end. Local value, okay, shadows, highlights. Then they come back, and then what's after that? What did I mention? They come back with gradients, and they come back in with texture overlays to pull out the texture, like the little gritty feel that's in here, or the shiny highlights in here to make that feel like it's, you know, overdone. They also, another thing that they're doing, you'll notice the complementing colors in here, where if they have a blue arm and then you have a warm highlight, do you see that? They start to play a little bit more with even the temperature of light hitting the character, okay? These guys are pros at what they do. They're amazing designers. Also notice the drop shadow. Also notice the light gray drop back here. Do you see that? How it goes from this gray that gradates down, and then there's a drop shadow under the characters. Very simple, okay? Look at this presentation. They have sort of this nice square block around the characters. They have a couple little elements, you know, back in here. They have things labeled. They have a little type here for the name of the character. It's not on white. Okay, it has a nice little sort of gradient with this little texture overlay on it. It looks like an old piece of like parchment paper. Okay, it's very nice, fantastic work. And again, if you look at part of the process, the way they're using little bounce light, reflective lights, and little highlights, you get this really fantastic approach to their work. Okay, same thing here. Just another style variation. These guys put a lot of effort into their work, and I mean, I always get students, how do I get better? How do I get, I mean, it's really simple to get better. Go find 5 different character designers that are all different and study their work and copy it and mimic it, and I promise you, you will get better. But look at their presentation. Sorry, that's a little pixelated. Their presentation is always spot on. It's like simple brown, a little bit of white, gets the characters to pop. You have a local value, you have a little bit of a gradient, airbrushed gradient on here. You have little texture spots on the characters. That's it. Simple. Okay, left alone. Okay, there's a lot of thought put into the presentation. So remember what I told you. A lot of times I've been with good artists that do good work and they have crappy presentation. It brings their work down to a B level. So you can be a B level artist and have really great presentation and make your work even look better than somebody else's. And when you're sitting on a production team with 10 other artists, and you have development artists, you have environment artists, character designers, story artists, and you're presenting your work up for a sequence, you better make sure that you're on your game and you're, you know, at top notch and your work is looking at a presentable level. If you don't know much about presentation, you need to start going into it and start thinking about these soft pastel colors under your work that get your work to pop up. I'm just showing you examples right now. Okay, what I need to show you to wrap up this demo is really quick. I need to show you 2 approaches in Photoshop on how you can change your line weight. Okay, so Beverly was nice enough to give us an example here of her character. Okay, Beverly, because I mentioned this before, you guys always want to make sure your line cleanup is on a separate layer. Inside, if you're using Sketchbook Pro, you have the option to save your files as a TIFF or as a PSD. It's under the preferences in Sketchbook Pro. It's really easy to figure out. So you can draw something and clean it up in Sketchbook Pro and bring it to Photoshop or vice versa. Okay, you can work in both applications together. So here's the first way that you can do this, okay? Number 1 is you can copy and select your, so we're going to talk about right now, how do you change the color of your line. So I can select this right now, copy it. Now, make sure you're on the line layer because I just wasn't. I'm going to copy it from right there, right? What I'm going to do is turn this off. I'm going to put a new layer up above. I'm going to hit paste. It pasted only the line work inside there. So what I can do really quickly, if you hit Command All, which selects all, you hit the V, which is the move tool, and then if you hit one of the arrow buttons on your keyboard, it will select. So again, let me hit deselect. That was Command All. You hit V on your keyboard, okay, which is right there, or you can select that guy. If you hold your cursor over it, it's the move tool, and then you hit an arrow. What that does is it selects the line for you. So now, if I were to hit Control H, okay, it didn't do it on here because I have some other weird, it hid my, hold on a minute, let me do that again. Maybe it did do it, let me see. Brush. Yeah, it did do it. It just looked weird. So what I did is I hit Control H right now. I hid my ants, okay, the selection lines. By hitting Control H, it allows me to then come over. Let's say your hair was going to be a darker version of pink. I can now come along and I could color her hair very easily. You see that? Let's say her skin is going to be, let's say she's somewhat tan. So I might come down here and think for her skin color might be somewhere in that area. So now I'm going to go a little bit darker down to there. And then I could come over here and I could just go along and I could go over part of her. I might have to zoom in on some of this. I'm doing it in the demo for you. I can come over here and I can now basically adjust her lines that's around her face that applies just to and only her skin color, let's say. So I could come into the rest of the character. I could do her jacket accordingly. I could do all of that. That's one approach, okay? Let me show you another approach that you can do, okay? So let's pretend I didn't do that. Let me go back to my lines here. Some people, this is a little bit more advanced approach, but it's really easy. I'm going to show you. You select that area of the line. You hit V in the Move tool again, okay? And then you select the arrows and you select it. I have the line selected. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a channel. In Photoshop, if you come over and you select your channels, hold on. I've selected that right now, by the way. I'm going to hit copy. I have that in my memory. Do you see that? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to come over to channels right now. You're going to hit deselect. I have nothing selected. But I copied that line weight, right? If I go to channels, if I click channels, and if I come down here, I'm going to click a new channel. Okay? What it does, it puts a channel on the bottom, and it automatically makes the whole screen go black like that. But if I come up here, and if I click on CYMK, this acts as some of people that were old school, that grew up with Rubylith, okay? This acts as a film that allows me to put the line onto the character's line in Photoshop. So if I hit paste right now, see what it did? It put the line weight there. And what I can do is I haven't done anything. I can move this anywhere I want, okay? And now the way it works is on my channel, if I use white or black, it either erases or adds to. So watch, I'm going to hit Control H, did it again, to hide my lines. I'm going to come in with my eraser, and I'm going to erase the character line. You see what's happening? By me erasing that character line, what it's going to do is it's going to create that selection for me. Now let's say I'm really technical and I don't want the whole character. If I come back here and switch to white, and if I go back to my brush, hold on a minute. I had it the other way. I was on eraser. So I can come back here, see this? I could create a selection for just her face if I wanted to. Do you see what I'm doing? I'm using white or black. I'm not using pink. I'm using white or black here. I could do just her face right now like that. I could get in there. I have to finish this demo really quick because my other class is waiting, but I can get in there and get just her face selected if I want. But let's say, oh, I missed her chin. Oops, I took too much out there. Well, if I come back here and I flip it and I go back to white, and I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to be able to come in here now and go just along her face. Now, this is brush sensitive. I have a fuzzy brush here. If I go to a hard edge brush, I can get just what I want. So if I want just her chin, and then I come back here, I flip back to black here, and I come back and I take this off. Give me a second here. Make sure I'm at 100% opacity. Channels are great because not only can I get just a selection I want, I can also add in textures and channels. So if I come over here and click this off, that's really what it looks like right now. Do you see that? So you look, I still have part of the body imprint. I don't want that in here. I'm going to switch back. And here I'm going to go back to 0. And I'm going to come in here. I'm going to fill this up. Now let me show you what I just did. Now I just did the whole face there. Let's say for some reason you don't want to. Let's say you want to do the whole body. Let me put the whole body in here. It's up to you. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this off. It won't let you just turn it off. You have to click and turn all the channels back on. If I turn this lower channel off right now, I'm going to label that line. Okay, do you see how I label that? Just like a layer. So I'm going to come back here, select CYMK. That's what I'm working in. Go back to layers. And watch. If I want to, on my image now, I can come up here, okay, and under layer, okay, I have a hotkey for this and always zone out exactly where it goes. Actually, it's not layer. It's going to be, what is it under? It's selection. Under select right here, if I come, hold on, that's why. I didn't have a layer, a new layer. I need a layer selected there. Now that I have the layer, if I come up over here and select, and I scroll down here to, what is it? Sorry, I have a hotkey on my computer, and I always keep it, and I always zone out when I have to do it manually. Here it is. It's, one second. So all you do, I'm too busy talking, not paying any attention. If you come up here, right, and we come back over here and you go down to load selection right there. So under select, load selection, okay? Up here, it'll say channel. See that? And if I click this, remember where I labeled it line? There's that line there. So now if I hit click and I hit load, boom, there's my line. So I could separate parts of the body out if I want to. And now that I have that loaded there, if I hit, remember, Control H is your friend, I'm hiding the line right there. And if I go over her right now, do you see what I'm doing? So the line's still there, folks. But if I hit Control H, this is how I could change in my character. So the reason why is that you might come back in Paint and be like, oh, I want to change my character's hair. Well, you can load a selection very easily. Okay? And the other thing with Photoshop, let's go back and do that again. Let me hit Control D to deselect. Let's go back to select. Let's go to load selection again. I can hit invert here. Hit OK and invert. Well, now let's see if it works right. Allows me to paint all around the character. I've inverted the selection. See how cool that is? So it keeps the line there. So if I hit deselect, now I have exact line around because I inverted the selection. Does that make sense? So what does that mean for me? That means if I have something inverted, I want to paint in a background around part of a selection, I could just come in here really quickly and throw something right behind a character, hit deselect, and my line sits there beautifully, not even touched. That's a benefit of channels. And again, channels allow you, I can go back into my channel. Remember how I added or subtracted? I can add to it, I can subtract to it, I can put textures on it. So even in my painting process, I can come back here. Let's say I'm on my character and then I want to go to a texture phase. I can come back here like this at the very end. I can go to my channels. I can select that channel, select it here, turn on the CYMK. There's the channel selection, right? And then I can go in here and I could add on other little elements to part of my character and do texture variants on top of it and all that type of good stuff. It's all ends up working the same. Watch, let me create a new channel here. Okay, let me turn this on. So let's say on my character, let's go back. Let me see if I have a gritty brush here real quick. Okay. Let's say I wanted to have some little gritty highlights on her. If I zoom in here really quick. So let me flip this. See how I did that real quick? I'm just going over that ruby lift like that. So that means in my painting process, now I can call this layer texture, TEX, right? And then I can come back here. I can go to my layers. Let's say I paint color and I want to come back here and put some type of weird highlights on the character. All I have to do is come back here now, select, load selection, come back here. I labeled it text, put it on text, hit OK, boom. There's my channel on top of her, right? So now I could hit hide. I could come back with a brush. Let's say, I don't know, for some reason she had these little purple highlights on her. For some reason, right? What happened there? I hit something by accident. Okay, well I know it's hidden. Create another layer there. There, I accidentally hit it. So if I come over here and paint, select, 1 second here, load selection, transparency, texture, okay, there it is. So it's there. Now I can come back and paint on my character and it's going to just get those little texture areas in there only. Okay, I need to get that above the layer up above. Okay, so, oops, I changed color to gray, didn't mean to do that. Let's say we're in a light purple. See that? It's going to pick up just that texture variant. That's a whole nother Photoshop lesson. How to create awesome textures and texturize something in Photoshop using channels. Channels are a great tool. So I could go into my character now, I could put all these little touch-ups, these little details. You know, I got to get this in the right place, so I just threw it up on top. And you see how I could apply that easily to adding little highlights or dirt on a sweatshirt or highlights on the face. Okay, Anyway, I'm going to end the demo right here so you guys can work. Remember, I'm not asking you to go in and do all that gradient effect and not do a ton of that. I can give you a more detailed lecture later on using channels for your color process. But for right now, just for using it for the line, it's absolutely fantastic. And it's just the principle that you can go in and change your line color extremely fast, okay? All right, guys, thanks, and I'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.